Hey guys, tonight we're clocking in for history's most miserable night shifts. No, not your 4 a.m. inventory job at the grocery store, or that time you dog sat for your cousin's incontinent pug. We're heading back to ancient China, where graveyard shift could mean that quite literally. Forget cozy pajamas, think cold stone streets, bats for coworkers, and a work uniform that's basically an "I'm not getting paid enough for this" sign, but written in bamboo. Before you nestle in, go ahead and tap the like button, then subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this kind of soothing pain. Drop a comment with your favorite night snack, or let me know if you're one of those people who's been working night shifts since pagers were a thing. Now dim the lights, bonus points for flickering candles, get that fan humming, and nestle into your bed. Let the worries of your spreadsheet and unreturned texts drift away. But seriously, have you ever wondered who kept those ancient cities running while everyone else slept? Did anybody really volunteer to work at night? Or was this punishment for losing a bet? What did midnight tech support mean in the year 732? Did ancient janitors fight rats with philosophical poetry, or just really big sticks? What's worse, a call from your boss at 3 a.m., or a run-in with a sleepwalking noble craving pickled snake? And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in Chang'an, capital of the Tang dynasty, in the dead of night. You're wearing clunky shoes, armed with a bamboo rattle, and your shift has just begun. Good luck. Ever tried to stay awake when your entire job depends on you not accidentally napping? You are the night watchman, an ancient Chinese blend of mall security and sleep-deprived philosopher. Your uniform, a felt hat 2 sizes too small, and a lantern that might set your sleeve on fire. Every creak of the city gates is your new arch-nemesis, and your only companion is the gentle question, is that footsteps or your mind playing tricks again? It's midnight, and the city is slick with silence, like a stage swept clean for spirits. You pace the same worn flagstones, the shape of your patrol carved into them by 1,000 footsteps before yours. Each one, you imagine, just as caffeinated and paranoid. Your ears become highly tuned instruments, catching every sighing wind as an omen. Is there a rat scuttling in the alley, or is it a bandit? You force your eyelids open and prod your cheek, just to check that you're still awake and not floating off in a fever dream. Sleep, however, is a seductive presence, always lingering at the edge of your vision, a will-o'-the-wisp that beckons with the promise of rest, only to dash you upon the rocks of responsibility. Tonight, the moon is your reluctant accomplice, casting long shadows across the city wall. Those shadows dance, coil, contract. At times you're half convinced they whisper about you, mocking your yawns. Occasionally a dog howls in the distance, and it is your job to look concerned, as if one determined fox could breach the entire city. So, you check the gates again, fingers tracing the cold iron, wishing that the keys hanging from your belt were actually a set of soothing chimes instead. In between rounds, you invent stories for yourself. Maybe the stone lion atop the gate once winked at you. Maybe the rustle in the bamboo is the spirit of an old poet-turned-cat burglar. Maybe, if you tilt your lantern just right, the mysterious glowing will reveal secrets on the pavement. A lost coin here, a forgotten sandal there. Each trivial discovery is another excuse to keep your mind from growing foggier. The city sleeps. You, however, walk with eyes wide open, shepherd of the unconscious, guardian of dreams you cannot have. After a week on the job, you learn the subtle art of insomnia, balancing just enough adrenaline to stay alert, without tipping over into the wild-eyed muttering of a man who hears voices in puddles. You develop a fondness for bitter tea and cold rice, your night meal as tasteless as your now faded hopes for a daytime profession. Every night, you greet the same stray cat, both of you wary but committed to this moonlit circuit. If luck is especially cruel, you meet him during your lowest ebb, just as your knees start to buckle and your vision blurs, his disinterested stare reminding you, do not falter, or worse, fall asleep. What keeps you going? Perhaps it's a pride that hardens in the silent hours, the knowledge that most will never know the cost of their peaceful sleep. Your steps become ritual, each turn a silent chant. No shadows pass, no doors open, no ill winds blow. You startle at your own reflection in a window, as if some tired ancestor is glaring at you, urging, don't let the old ways down. And so you press on, squinting into the darkness, counting breaths, trusting that dawn will come, eventually, if only you can keep your eyes open long enough to greet it. As the first pale blue slips into the eastern sky, your vigilance is finally rewarded. A rooster crows, the city stirs, and you slump against the wall, drained but satisfied. A sentinel who has wrestled the tyrant sleep and, for another night, has survived. The day watch will replace you soon, with fresh eyes and a clean uniform. But you, night watchman, will shuffle home, where the only shadow that follows is your own, and the only danger ahead is the lure of your long-coveted bed. By now, you've mastered the fine art of the bamboo clapper, a job that's equal parts rhythm, volume, and existential regret. Your mission: walk the city every hour, announcing when it's time to not be robbed. Too loud and you're hated. Too soft and you're fired or burgled. No pressure. Let's set the scene. It's midnight. The street lamp flickers, casting long, theatrical shadows across uneven cobblestones. You shuffle past shuttered tea shops and snoozing street dogs, clutching your bamboo rattle as both prop and shield. It's the sort of job that guarantees you a front row seat to both humanity's most mundane moments. That's the fifth rat I've seen tonight. And it's most profound every time someone peeks out to nod, half thankful, half annoyed. Ah, so the world is still turning and still loud. As for the bamboo clapper itself, it's deceptively simple. 2 sticks, a piece of twine, and the ever-present fear that you'll make a sound so distinctive it wakes up not just the neighborhood, but your ancestors. But there's a rhythm to it, an artful, syncopated tapping, never the same pattern twice. Some nights, you play it military tight and brisk. Others, you improvise, throwing in extra clicks just for yourself. You quickly learn which doors creak, which dogs bark back, and which windows produce unsolicited opinions on your sense of timing. This, after all, is not simply a matter of keeping time. It's a sacred and uneasy dance with public space, where your sounds slice through forbidden silence. It's the knowledge that, for the length of each shift, you are both a minor celebrity, with a following of precisely 2 insomniacs, and a scapegoat in waiting. Did a petty theft occur despite your diligent clacking? Congratulations, you are, once again, the talk of the morning, and not in a good way, and the uniform. Forget about fine tailoring. Tonight you sport regulation gray, one size fits none, with pockets just big enough for a lantern, a bit of rice, and a handful of doubts. Your shoes? Soft enough not to wake a mouse, uncomfortable enough to remind you every step that you are not above manual labor. You pass the same doorways and noodle carts so many times that the city's layout imprints on your brain, forever cataloging which alleys echo and which simply absorb your nightly tunes. But noise, it turns out, isn't just about decibels, it's about reputation. To the old guard, your clapper's cadence is a lullaby, grimly reassuring. To the newly arrived, it's an unwelcome jolt. You perform nightly for an audience you rarely see, whose applause comes in the form of a morning without incident. No break-ins, no missing chickens, just a few grumpy looks as people sweep their thresholds at dawn. Of course, not everyone trusts that a bit of bamboo racket deters crime. Critics abound, whispering that it's ritual, not reason, that keeps burglars at bay. Some suggest your true crime-fighting skill lies in the ability to keep a straight face when asked. So, how effective is that thing, really? But you keep going, fueled by the knowledge that tradition, like the best bamboo, is surprisingly hard to snap. Every so often, on your rounds, the city reminds you why this odd, noisy vigil matters. Maybe a mother smiles in relief when she hears you nearby, or a merchant sleeps soundly, his goods safe. Maybe, on a rare clear night, your rhythm mingles with the distant laughter of late-night card players and the quiet pulse of city life, and you realize all noise is not created equal. And so you walk, you rattle, you mark the hours, a humble guardian of wakefulness and sleep, neither hero nor fool, but something quietly essential in between. It's just you, the moon, and some guy named Lee with suspiciously bulging sleeves. Your job requires a keen nose for trouble, which usually smells like dried fish left out for 3 days. At least there are no security cameras, just the judging stares of alley cats and the vague threat of kung fu masters with insomnia. The city at 2 a.m. is a different animal altogether. The main arteries pulse with the hum of distant traffic, but here in the arteries' capillaries, the winding alleys behind neon noodle shops and hole-in-the-wall mahjong dens. It's quieter, thick with the scent of fried oil, stale tobacco, and last week's rain. You stick to the shadows, where the moonlight dapples cracked concrete and every stray bottle cap echoes like a pistol shot. You're not alone. Lee lingers just at the edge of your vision, shuffling with the practiced nervousness of someone who's done this dance 100 times. Lee stops beneath a flickering street lamp, pretending to tie his shoe. You know that trick, the patented move of the amateur pickpocket deciding whether you're prey or a fellow predator. You clear your throat loud enough for the cats to glare, and Lee to glance up, eyes wide, sleeves settling imperceptibly tighter around whatever's hidden. "Nice night for a stroll," you say, sounding like every cliched detective who ever graced a black and white TV. Lee just nods, tight, wary. In this job, you learn to appreciate the quiet people. They rarely lie with words, just with silences and the awkward choreography of their hands. The beat is slow tonight. With the city's official enforcers haunting the main roads, the side streets inherit their own logic. 1 part mutual distrust, 2 parts resigned camaraderie. A noodle vendor dumps yesterday's broth into the gutter, scowling at you like you're personally responsible for the rats. Above, windows flicker with blue-tinted TV light. Watchers behind curtains weighing whether to stick their necks out or stay invisible. Your radio crackles, an analog artifact that refuses to die, much like most of your colleagues. A clipped voice, possible break-in 2 blocks north, furniture warehouse. You let the report hang. Warehouse jobs at this hour are mostly unlicensed squatters or desperate souls scavenging for scrap. Every now and then, it's something less innocent, but you've learned not to jump at shadows, at least not unless they start moving. "You coming, Lee?" you ask, though you don't expect an answer. Of course he follows. Story of your lives. At the warehouse, the front gate yawns open, padlock neatly sliced. No alarm, no dog, just silence so thick you can taste your heartbeat. You slip inside, flashlight held low, shoes scuffing the detritus. A shape flits between rows of broken tables. You freeze, breathing in the dampness, the wood rot, the metallic tang of someone else's fear. "Just looking for a quiet place to sleep," comes a voice, trembling but defiant. Another night, another itinerant pushed to the city's margins. You lower your guard an inch. "Easy," you mutter, more to yourself than to him. Each night teaches you the same lesson. Survival has no uniform. Some nights enforcing the law means turning a blind eye, trading the official line for human decency. You scribble a warning in your battered notepad, more out of habit than hope, and leave the man with a food voucher you confiscated last week. Nothing heroic about it, just another page in the unwritten rulebook of night watchmen. Heading back, Lee falls into step beside you, sleeves a little less ominous now. Neither of you speaks. The city's night air has a way of making conversation seem frivolous, each word stolen from the kind of silence that both shields and accuses. In the distance, dawn starts picking at the horizon, pulling apart the city's shadowy quilt. Another shift survived, another round of alley cats, moonlit secrets, and people doing what they must under the indifferent gaze of the sleepless city. You don't expect thanks. Night only pays in lessons and in the sort of stories nobody believes until they've walked a mile with the empty streets and a man named Lee with secrets in his sleeves. Picture yourself enforcing the sacred city curfew. It's 10 p.m., and everyone not important must vanish. If you're a curfew enforcer, congratulations. You have no friends. Your only meaningful conversations are with stern grandmothers slow-walking their way home and teenagers inventing the world's first fake IDs. Let's be honest, nobody dreams of being the city's living lights-out announcement. The job description reads less like protector of public safety and more like mobile wallflower with a flashlight. While others are out toasting to the night, the curfew enforcer's social media updates read, "Another successful interaction with Mrs. Kapoor about whether 10:01 p.m. counts as rebellion." Your evening networking events consist of standing at empty bus stops, making uncomfortable eye contact with the last straggler of the night, usually a distant cousin you'd rather pretend not to know. Phone in hand, the only messages you get are not memes, but panicked explanations from people caught 5 minutes past the bell. "Just one more samosa, officer, I swear." There's an unspoken law that even other city workers avoid the curfew enforcer at parties. Suddenly, everyone needs fresh air when you join the circle. Hey, isn't that the guy who wrote my aunt up for walking her schnauzer at 10:12 p.m.? No one recognizes your authority under fluorescent lights, but let that city clock tick past 10, and suddenly you're all anyone can talk about, just never to your face. Friendships for the curfew enforcer are measured in nods with street sweepers and the cryptic thumbs up from late-night fruit vendors packing up in a hurry. You might get waves from delivery riders, but only because they're hoping you'll look the other way as their moped zips through a red light. Social calendars empty, yet your internal clock is finely tuned. Midnight snacks become solitary feasts. Samosas for one, cold chai for company. Of course, there are the regular clients. The boy who tests your route boundaries every week, sprinting from alley to alley, convinced he's in a Mission Impossible montage. Or the philosopher who argues that freedom is technically a 24-hour concept. You learn to navigate arguments using a unique blend of bureaucratic sternness and therapist patience. Sometimes your best therapy is an imaginary conversation with the city pigeons. At least you lot have no curfew, you mutter, as another group of rebellious adolescents tries to outwit you with tales of a lost puppy or a runaway flip-flop. Romance? Let's just say there's nothing that says single and available quite like a uniform with a badge shaped like a parking ticket. Swipe left for enforces bedtime. Swipe right for can spot fibbing teens at 20 paces. Dating apps start asking, is this really your career or just a creative writing prompt? If you do manage a night out, you're unable to shake work mode. At any gathering, you're the unintentional buzzkill. It's 9:45, everyone. Maybe we should wrap up. The room goes silent. You forget that? Outside your jurisdiction, people are allowed to enjoy themselves after sundown. Old habits die hard. So does the phone grip when you hear laughter outside after 10. There are, however, small joys. You become an expert in all-night radio, perfect weather for pacing, and the subtle pleasure of catching a shooting star mid-patrol. Sometimes, an elderly resident offers you stale biscuits, more out of pity than gratitude. It's a lonely role in the theater of the city, but it has dramatic pathos, equal measure tragic hero and cosmic comedian. And if ever you doubt your impact, just recall the city's heartbeat at 10:05, still, orderly, and safe. Somewhere, thanks to your efforts, a grandmother enjoys her tea knowing the night belongs to peace, and the curfew enforcer, quietly, belongs to the night. When the last candle burns out, your time begins. You, lucky soul, are a gong farmer, midnight's master of human waste disposal. The moonlight glints mysteriously off buckets you wish you'd never seen. You tell yourself this is honest work, but it sure isn't fragrant work. Your world belongs to the stillness between cricket chirps and distant dogs barking at shadows. You pull your collar over your nose, bracing for what lies ahead. Officially, you are charged with emptying privies, cesspits, and whatever foul vessel the city's bladders and bowels could fill. Unofficially, your job is to ensure a polite society can strut confidently through the daylight, unsullied by the reminders of last night's stew. Tonight, the city is quiet. To you, it's never quiet enough. The tools of your trade are simple and brutal. Long-handled ladles, heavy buckets, thick gloves if you're fortunate, and boots you fervently hope will survive the ordeal. The bravest souls might hang a sprig of sweet-smelling herbs from a buttonhole, as if a posy could mask years of secrets contained in the pit below. You start with a prayer, not for courage, but for a nose that will forgive, a stomach that shows mercy, and a sturdy grip. You work quickly. Speed is dignity in your line of business. If you're seen in the daylight, you're invisible. At night, you're a ghost among the living, the city's necessary shadow. You learn the sounds of a street under moonlight, the suspicious quiet of an alley where trouble likes to nap, and the telltale groan of a privy ready to give way. As you lift another lid, the pungency strikes like a physical blow, and you marvel that noses can grow numb to nearly anything, given enough repetition. Some nights you wonder about the lives above your route, the laughter, the arguments, the daily dramas. What secrets have been whispered above these trenches? What plans and promises, spilled alongside chamber pots of the city's mighty and meek? But the job never lets you ponder for long. Time is, quite literally, money. The city council pays for cubic feet, not for daydreams. Occasionally, your night offers up small treasures, a dropped coin glinting in grime, a misplaced trinket, the broken wooden toy of a child now grown. Little reminders that your work holds the hidden history of the whole town, albeit in the least celebrated of forms. You remind yourself there's pride in usefulness. Without you, privies overflow, contagion festers, and grand feasts quickly become public health disasters. There's a camaraderie among gong farmers. Others might wrinkle their noses in contempt, but your comrades and smells know the real value of your labor. A shared glance, a grunted greeting, a muffled joke about finding gold in the muck. Your band of brothers and sisters against the odds. Some will move on, graduate to daytime work, maybe buy a market stall with enough saved coins. Others, like you, become nocturnal stoics, carrying on a profession as old as civilization itself. Now and then, a faint breeze carries the scent away, and you glimpse the stars. You remember that the same moon shines brightly over the manor as it does the slum, unbothered by the smells rising beneath its glow. That's comfort enough. By the end of your shift, your hands ache, your clothes are heavy, and your mind floats in that liminal space between exhaustion and relief. As you haul your last bucket toward the dung heap outside the city walls, you allow yourself a measure of pride. In a strange, inverted way, your efforts make the city sparkle by sunrise. You will sleep while others rise, and when they draw in the crisp morning air, they'll never know they owe it in part to you, a quiet hero of the moonlit hours, guarding the line between filth and civilization. Let me know if you'd like this tailored even further, or if you want historical notes or dialogue incorporated. Sweeping empty streets is the ancient equivalent of listening to a 3-hour podcast at 1 a.m. It's peaceful, it's repetitive, it's occasionally horrifying. As you sweep up yesterday's market leftovers, you wonder if peach pits ever decompose, or if you'll be reborn as a broom in your next life. It's only when everyone else has gone home, the drunks are halfway through their incoherent arguments with lampposts, and the cats have declared their nightly territories that you can truly appreciate the city's insomniac heart. The world shrinks down to you, your broom, and whatever detritus the day has left behind. The night air feels thick with secrets, cool against the sweat on your forehead. You invent a taxonomy of trash, wilted greens whispered from grocers' stalls, glass fragments that catch the light like vagrant diamonds, the mysterious crumpled notes you're too superstitious to read. Each item swept into your pan carries a ghostly echo of its owner, a story you'll never know, but briefly touch. Your thoughts stretch and wander in the rhythm of sweeping, circling, looping. The bristles drum out a hypnotic music on the cobblestones. Sometimes you lose yourself so deeply that the act of cleaning becomes a form of meditation, erasing not just grime, but your own intruding worries. You catch yourself grinning at some half-remembered joke, the punchline dissolving into the darkness with the sweep of a candy wrapper. The moon peeks out behind a chimney like it's checking on you, and you salute it with your broom before the clouds reclaim it. Occasionally, an animal crosses your path, a stray dog, a rat, the esteemed lord of midnight banquets, or an owl perched overhead, always regarding you with bored contempt. You both have your place in the nocturnal ecosystem, civilians on the edge of dreams. The night is theirs first and yours second, and you respect the hierarchy with a theater of mutual ignoring. Things are never quite as quiet as they seem. In the silence, you hear the gentle grind of your broom, the pop and sigh of distant embers, a laugh that travels 3 blocks before it dies. The city's true soundtrack is assembled at night by those who don't sleep or who work through it. Bakers, ambulance drivers, lost poets, and insomniac lovers. You are part of their invisible fellowship, all of you keeping time in a city that never really stops. Sometimes you catch yourself composing little haikus about the things you find. Rotten apple cores. Cobblestones beneath my feet. Dreams dissolve like fruit. You imagine a contest for the best trash haiku, judged by mice and alley cats. The humor is small and private, but in the middle of a 12-hour shift, small jokes are survival. Still, in the marathon of sweeping, you encounter the occasional horror. There are things best left unsaid, things best tackled with the end of your broom and the beginning of dawn. But even these grotesqueries have a place in the order of things, serving as reminders that nobody passes through the world without leaving something behind, deliberately or otherwise. If you're lucky, you might meet another sweeper and exchange a brief nod, a camaraderie that needs no words. Sometimes you split a cigarette or compare notes on the week's most unusual finds. You marvel at the night's democracy, the unremarked hierarchy flattening, everyone simply tired and alive. With each street cleared, you feel a peculiar pride. The city will wake to roads that look untouched, as if order is natural, not endlessly and invisibly restored. You know better. There's satisfaction in anonymity, in being part of the silent machinery that undergirds the day. In the end, you sweep your own thoughts into a tidy pile, ready for the next shift, the next dawn. Maybe peach pits never disappear. Maybe, like street sweepers, they learn to endure, quietly persisting through all the nights and mornings yet to come. Before electricity, darkness was only held at bay by patient, underpaid lantern lighters. It's your job to stagger down the avenue, lantern pole in hand, one missed step away from setting your clothes, or a beloved noodle stall on fire. The city may sleep, but your eyebrows never truly relax. In truth, the job description is deceptively simple. Light each lantern, move on, repeat. Yet in the inky hush after midnight, each flame you coax to life feels like an act of rebellion against the void. Fat drops of condensation gather on your collar as the lantern glass fogs. You strike your match, and in that heartbeat pause, a fuse's breath before light, every grime-caked brick and pebble on the cobblestone seems to hold its own nervous giggle. Cats blink in doorways, contemplating whether your flickering torch means food, or trouble, or astonishing entertainment. As you shuffle from street to street, the city's oddities emerge. The woman who counts cracks in the pavement, the man who cannot sleep until his doorstep is swept clean by you, the accidental broom bringer, whirling ashes from each new flame. You learn which lanterns are possessed by wind spirits, indignant gusts that snatch your match away and cackle in the gutter, versus those whose glass domes sigh contentedly at your gentle touch. Once, you relit the same lantern 6 times in 15 minutes. Somewhere, an impish breeze had appointed itself your rival. There's a camaraderie in your trade. Lantern lighters pass one another on their routes, sharing nods and muted jokes, thick with code. Watch out for number 14 tonight. She's sulking. The baker's kid swore he saw a ghost near the bridge, probably just last week's cheese. You swap tales of near disasters, singed hems, hats knocked askew by errant laundry lines, the mysterious disappearance of an entire lamppost. To this day, nobody confessed to that street improvement. There is pride, too, in being the city's unofficial sentinels, the ones who make the darkness less absolute. But this is no job for the faint-hearted or the fashion-minded. Nicks and smudges tell your story. Burn marks up your sleeve, resinous stains on your knees, the unmistakable smell of singed hair. Your hands become maps of soot and scar tissue, your pockets repositories for half-spent wax and lucky matches. Some nights, you daydream pyromaniac fantasies. What if, just once, you did let the fire get out of control? 10,000 lanterns roaring to life in a tangled inferno. Of course, you never give in to temptation, mostly because, you know, should anything go up in smoke, you'd be the first one blamed. Children, wide awake and restless, sometimes follow you, instant apprentices in the clandestine arts of flame, daring you to light 2 lanterns at once. "Do it backwards," they hiss, thrilled by the spectacle of controlled peril. You oblige, once, twice, until you near the district watchman's post, and your crowd melts away, no more than shadows. At the end of your round, dawn a soft rumor on the horizon, you pause at your own favorite lantern. It's always been there, marked by a scratch in the glass, your tiny signature. You light it last, linger longer, and watch your small flame chase away the blackness for a few more precious moments. The city may not know your name, but for one more night, you've kept the darkness at bay. A pyromaniac's dream, conquered, not in a blaze of glory, but in 100 quiet flickers, one careful step from chaos. You never wanted to be a rock star, but you can drum a 10-pound block of wood with both hands while chanting the hour. Congratulations! You're the reason half the city hates you, and the other half wakes up exactly on time to complain. As the first sliver of moonlight spills down the temple steps, your world condenses into a haze of anticipation and responsibility. With ancient drumsticks, maybe a little too heavy, definitely a little too battered, You stand at the threshold between silence and ceremony. The city sleeps around you, but you stand ready, heartbeats syncopated with the hour. Midnight is your stage, your audience the restless, dreaming masses. They call you Jaya, talk man, that guy who ruins my sleep. They curse your name, shake their fists at the sky. Perhaps one day they'll thank you. Today, they keep their gratitude as silent as the minutes you mark. But here's the secret, only you and your ancestors know. Without the relentless rhythm you keep, the day would fracture, tumble off its rails, and the old stories say calamity would sneak in with the morning fog. You wonder about your predecessor, the one whose sandals hang on a crooked nail in the temple storeroom, a faint echo of steps and smudged prayers. Did he stand trembling in the dark, the echo of his own heartbeat drowned by the expectation of the city? Did he ever wish for quieter tasks, water carrier, incense waver, anything else? It's not courage that keeps you pounding the wood in those hours when the temple cats alone know your pain. It's duty, and, okay, maybe a little bit of pride. Picture the city. Shivering rooftops, alley cats poised mid-pounce, the perfume of midnight jasmine falling in little ghosts around sleeping courtyards. Your stick meets wood. 1, 2, precise, ragged, important. No matter who is listening, your rhythm is law. It's a handshake with time, a deal struck with the spirits hunched in sandalwood shadows. The sound bounces off plaster and tile, skids across nighttime boulevards, slips through ironwork grates. In every echo, somewhere between sacred tradition and necessary nuisance, you exist. Occasionally, a bleary-eyed neighbor will scramble up the temple steps, half dreaming, half grumbling. They'll wag a finger. Can't you skip a night? No, you really can't. You'll try reasoning. Without the beat, who counts the hours? But their only answer is a snort and a retreat, wrapped in the cracked dignity of the recently awoken. Still, some nights when the moon is gentle, a lonely widow or an insomniac baker will linger by the temple gates, silently grateful for the comfort in the predictable pattern. In the darkness, you see their nod. You hear a thank you, not in words, but in the way they breathe more easily. Tradition says you're just the messenger, announcing the hour so others can pray, protect, prepare. But as the months wear on, you begin to realize the beat is not only an alarm, not only a curse laid on sleepless heads. It is the measure of belonging, of being tethered to the whole city in the invisible web of shared time. When your hands drum the wood, you touch stories older than the street layout, older than the drum itself. Maybe when dawn trickles over the horizon and your shift ends, you slip away quietly, blending with the drowsy faithful and the early market hawkers. Nobody applauds, nobody throws flowers, but in the distance, you glimpse a mother stirring porridge, a grandfather stretching on a balcony, a lantern lit precisely on time. These small moments, precise and mysterious, are your applause. Keeper of the midnight beat, you stand guard over slumber and waking, and for as long as the city remembers its heartbeat, your rhythm will carry in the bones of every new day. By 2 a.m., the city's unofficial cafes, tiny stands serving dubious tea, and even more dubious gossip, are open for business. Night laborers like you gather here, swapping tall tales about haunted wells, questionable pastries, and the time someone's tunic caught fire mid-shift. These alleyway concoctions exist in the uncharted territory between insomnia and tradition. Their decor is strictly accidental. A battered oil lamp here, a wobbling wooden bench there, shadows cast by the flicker of lanterns, and the persistent scent of burnt sugar and wet cobblestones. Each makeshift cafe is an oasis of warmth set adrift in the city's labyrinthine arteries, a place where the lines between fact and fiction become syrupy and indistinct, just like the honey spooned into chipped ceramic cups. You squeeze along the narrow lanes, led by fragrant trails of anise and clove. A burly baker, flour still clinging to his forearms, haggles noisily with a sleepless fishmonger over who really saw the midnight ghost at the city gate. In the background, the tea vendor, a wiry woman with an eagle eye for bad coin, refills everyone's glasses with a deft tilt of her battered kettle. The liquid hits the bottom with a sound as comforting as a lullaby, though the taste is likely to keep you awake for hours yet. Here, every regular has a story. The older and more improbable, the better. A tailor insists he once found a golden needle in his morning crust, a prize allegedly bequeathed by grateful household spirits. The city's tired lamplighter, eyes rimmed with sleeplessness, speaks only in riddles and half-remembered ballads, his voice curling around the steam rising from his cup. Nobody asks for the baker's recipe for sleepy bread, a lopsided loaf rumored to cause vivid, hilarious dreams. It's safer not to know. As the hour creeps even later, the tangle of voices softens, the laughter slows, conversations dipping into the lullaby, rhythm of shared complaint and resignation. The tea now tastes saltier, either because someone topped up the pot from a nearby well, or because a little of the city's midnight melancholy slipped in. You listen as a sandal maker recalls how, last week, all the stray cats fell silent at the same moment. Another regular claims to have met an angel disguised as a stray dog. No one laughs. Here, in these twilight alleys, all stories get their chance in the candlelight. Every once in a while, a city guard ambles past, drawn not by the threat of crime, but by the promise of heat and spicy pastry. She accepts a crust stuffed with lentils, glances over her shoulder, and, finding no superior in sight, sits with her back to the alley wall. "Don't print this in tomorrow's market gossip," she warns. "But there's a place by the river that sells stew made from last week's lottery birds." The table erupts in disbelief and speculation, but no one doesn't finish their tea. Outside, the city whispers lullabies and secrets. Somewhere, a rooster, chronically confused, croaks out a question to the false dawn. You realize, with a sudden flush of affection, that these insomniac cafes are more than just pause points for the weary. They're fragile, ephemeral republics of sleeplessness, each cup and crumb held together by a communal refusal to surrender the night. Time persists stubbornly here, measured not in hours or coins, but in rounds of stories and dregs of teacups. At last, as the alley's shadows give in to the slow blue of morning, you rise, brushing sugar dust from your lap. To return to work is to re-enter the city as it begins again, rejuvenated by camaraderie and the shared warmth of night's gentle absurdity. Tomorrow's tea will be just as awful, the benches just as wobbly, and the stories, somehow, stranger still. Ever tried working with a tailbrush brigade of street rats and an army of cats convinced they own the night? Ancient Chinese cities had more fur than a modern cat cafe. Try not to think about the sounds from the gutter behind you. Imagine walking through the old city gates at dusk, lantern in hand, only to spot a shadow slinking alongside you. It's not a burglar, not a ghost, but a cat making nightly rounds with all the gravity of a local magistrate. In a place where refuse piled high and food scraps were an everyday sight, these were no mere pets. They were self-appointed guardians, entrepreneurs working the graveyard shift. You'd be forgiven for thinking each corner had its own feline gang, staking out territories as fiercely as any human merchant. The rats, however, were a different story. If the cats were the night's lords, rats were its foot soldiers, relentless, organized, and entirely shameless. They didn't wait for the cloak of darkness. They thrived in it. Sightings weren't rare, but almost ritual. A flicker of movement in the corner of your eye as you navigated narrow alleys, the gleam of beady eyes in torchlight. It was all part of the night's tapestry. Rats and people weren't so different, both just looking for scraps, trying not to step in something unspeakable. In the quieter hours, as city noises faded into a tapestry of distant calls and clattering carts, the real drama would unfold behind the scenes. Bakers, wrapping up their day, learned to keep dough out of paw's reach. Paper lantern makers stored rice glue out of sight. Clay potters stacked their wares atop wooden planks, not just for display, but defense. If you heard yowling at 2 a.m., it wasn't a sign of doom. It was a turf war, a nightly negotiation that occasionally spilled into human dreams, only to be shrugged off at dawn. This uneasy détente sometimes erupted into full-scale chaos. A market vendor, dozing off during night shift, would awake to find his dried fish taxed, by a particularly daring rat, only for a scuffle with a cat to break out right under his stall. Shouts would echo down the lane as animals scattered into the dark, each convinced they had won the grand prize, while the humans added another tally to their ledger of things ruined, but who's counting? Behind the furry drama lurked another truth. For many city dwellers, these animals were woven into daily life. Cats, in particular, enjoyed a complicated fame. Some temples considered them lucky. carving their likenesses on gates and rooftops, convincing passersby that a cat's blessing kept away vermin and ill fortune. Superstitions came and went, but the cats remained, aloof, inscrutable, and entirely uninterested in the affairs of mortals unless food was at stake. Meanwhile, rats had fans of their own, albeit reluctant ones. Scribes and scholars sometimes left scraps behind on purpose, hoping to appease the little thieves in exchange for a quiet night and unchewed scrolls. If ever a rat was found drowning in a drain, enterprising locales were known to haul it out and release it far from home, because even a city teeming with them feared bad luck from a vengeful rodent. Those with night jobs, watchmen, lamplighters, alley sweepers, spoke quietly about their uninvited coworkers. Some considered them mascot, others nuisance. A few slyly admitted that the creatures made the city safer in their own chaotic way. Cats kept rats in check, rats cleaned up what humans left behind, and everyone kept their distance from the dogs, who, for reasons known only to them, preferred to nap until daylight. So, next time you stroll through an ancient street, lanterns swinging and shadows dancing, listen for soft paws or tiny claws. In cities that never truly slept, the night mascots ruled, each with their own story to tell, if only you paused long enough to look. If your night job involved patrolling the city cemetery, congratulations. You're about to master the art of not looking over your shoulder. Every shadow is either a spirit or a very aggressive goose, and you wonder why nobody wrote a safety manual for this. First, let's talk about the unique silence. Ordinary quiet just means no one's talking. Graveyard quiet means there's a non-zero chance something's listening. Even the wind seems to tiptoe, and every gust through dried leaves sounds suspiciously like footsteps. As you pass headstones that have stood longer than most office buildings, you find yourself negotiating with the universe. Okay, if I make it to the big oak tree and nothing grabs my ankle, I'll definitely call my grandma tomorrow. Graveyard shifts in actual graveyards are a whole subculture of working life. A secret society of night owls, flashlight wielders, and those who've perfected the sideways glance. Sure, some of your friends spend evenings binging Netflix or working at 24-hour diners, but you get existential dread as a free add-on to the minimum wage. On your first few nights, you clutch your flashlight like it's a holy relic. You try to play it cool as you make your rounds, but each unfamiliar creak in the distance is either a raccoon plotting mischief or, worse, the one dynamic ghost who just can't let go of the 19th century. The job description might say security, but the essential skills are improvisational bravery and a PhD in pretending you didn't hear that whisper behind the mausoleum. You get used to a lot of things. The strange shapes cast by half-toppled statues, the fog that rolls in precisely at midnight, as if summoned from central casting, and, of course, the occasional prank, because nothing says friendship like coworkers hiding behind an angel statue with a rubber skeleton. It's good practice for a heart attack, really, but being alone in the cemetery doesn't just teach you new ways to channel adrenaline. It gives you a front-row seat to nature's night shift. Foxes slinking between tombstones, bats choreographing their dusk ballet, and the world's bravest opossum investigating discarded snack wrappers. Occasionally, you catch a glimpse of a fellow human, a late-night urban explorer, or somewhere in your memory's pranking file, the mayor's nephew trying to impress friends by spending minutes. Okay, 5 minutes in the haunted corner. Then, there are the stories. Every graveyard worker collects them. You hear about the lady in blue, who supposedly appears near the Civil War memorial, or the marble angel whose gaze is rumored to follow trespassers. Secretly, your inner skeptic is locked in a fierce battle with your imagination. Is it just a trick of moonlight, or is tonight the night you become local legend as the one who fainted next to plot G17? As time goes by, your biggest threat turns out to be neither phantoms nor folklore, but boredom. You read books by flashlight, master crosswords, and develop encyclopedic knowledge about the quirks of moss species. Sometimes boredom gives way to introspection, and you realize you've never felt quite so alive as when you're surrounded by symbols of the opposite. It's both humbling and oddly reassuring. Eventually, your fear subsides, replaced by familiarity, even fondness. You come to appreciate the graveyard's rhythm, the city in slumber, the occasional hoot of an owl, the respectful hush. You become a silent steward, a protector not only of the grounds, but, in a way, of the unwritten rules that hold the living and the dead in their delicate nighttime truce. So, the next time you walk those midnight paths, you tip your hat to the shadows and the stories, because you've learned. In the graveyard shift, every chill down your spine is just another part of the job description. When everyone's sleeping off their dumplings, you're in the square, scraping last night's banquets off the pavement. Congratulations. You've unlocked a new level of unspeakable sights, sounds, and smells. Some jobs hand you a badge. This one gives you a shovel. It's not glamorous. Your workday begins before the sun's alarm goes off, the city still wrapped in the haze of dreams and leftover takeout fumes. There's a certain pride to being one of the silent few who keep the show running. While others debate the best bao in town, you're knee-deep in the aftermath. Sticky rice here, slippery noodles there. Sometimes you'd swear the food walks off on its own. There's a rhythm to cleaning up Market Square. The slap of your broom, the slow roll of wheels on the wagon, the soft, resigned sighs of fellow crew members. No one speaks much at first. Words aren't necessary. You all share the same mission, restoring the cobblestones to their neutral state before the first vendors arrive. Leftovers tell the story of last night's revelry. Here's a patch of spilled black vinegar. There's the telltale glisten of discarded hot pot. Every stain has a tale, but you sweep them away without asking for details. The crew is a cast of regulars and the odd short-termer, roped in by a desperate friend or seldom-seen cousin. Among you are poets, grandmothers, students, and chefs between gigs. Old Chen leads the pack, wielding his mop like a general brandishing a saber. If there were medals for efficiency or bravery in the line of grime, Old Chen would have a chest full. Sweep with purpose, he tells anyone who will listen, and even those who won't. You learn the tricks. Don't step where you can't see. Deshel shrimp with your eyes closed. Wear boots always. Above all, watch for the puddle traps, those sticky, ambiguous zones that defy description but spell disaster for anyone moving too quickly. Last week, a volunteer tried to show off, only to become one with a discarded tapioca pudding. There are moments of camaraderie, sparked by shared misery and unexpected humor. Someone finds a fortune cookie, peels it open, and reads, "You will stumble upon great luck." Everyone laughs, except for the new guy, who just stepped in a pile of pungent mystery meat. There are competitions, who can fill their bucket fastest, who can guess what used to be in that unidentifiable heap. The square becomes your gym, stage, and confessional. By midday, you could fill a novella with the quirky vignettes you witness, the alley cat that follows you for an hour, a child's lost toy reunited with its owner, a couple's midnight breakup evidenced by a heart-shaped, half-eaten mooncake, scuffed and forlorn. You begin to see the city differently. Market Square, before and after, tells a story of transformation. You're not just tidying up, you're resetting the stage for the day's dramas, removing yesterday's evidence so today can start fresh. And, as the sun finally cracks over the roofs, gilding the remnants of your labor with golden light, you feel a quiet satisfaction. No parade, no applause. Just the knowledge that, for a few hours, you are the invisible caretaker of tradition and chaos, protector of revelers' secrets, the unsung hero of tidiness. By the time the crowds return, the square looks untouched. Almost. You know where the stubborn stains are, and which ones tell the best. Stories. You hang up your broom, wave goodbye to Old Chen, head home. Tonight's another banquet, another layer of untold tales. You'll be back for the morning after, ready to do it all again. Not all night workers are cursed. Some feed the rest of you. Soup vendors breeze through the night, ladling questionable stew to anyone with a coin and a late-night craving. Hope you like mystery meats. If there's any profession that knows the city from the ground up, it's the soup vendor. They don't just see the streets, they smell them, taste them. Their cauldrons roll from shadow to shadow, settling near hungry crowds, outside brothels or gambling halls, wherever dazed revelers stagger out searching for absolute salvation, or, failing that, something to keep down until morning. The soup stand is an institution. Part confession booth, part curiosity cabinet, part midnight last. Rites for the truly desperate, all sustained by the eternal question. What's in this anyway? Everything about these vendors is elusive. Their origins, their recipes, what, if anything, they do with leftovers. Some say the best soup peddlers possess a sixth sense for hunger, materializing at exactly the moment when a drunk's need for warmth outweighs his fear of food poisoning. They drift in on clouds of broth steam, faces half lit by the orange glow of portable lanterns, smiling crookedly as they scoop up the night's special. Always called special, never explained. There's magic in that word, or menace. The two are often confused in the deep hours. Soup vendors serve a melting pot city, so their pots echo its history. Spices traded on secret docks, vegetables grown in alleys, a hint of last week's catch or some local cryptid that didn't run fast enough. The regulars pretend not to notice the extra crunch in their bowl, choosing faith over curiosity. But listen closely, and you'll hear stories whispered over soup, tales of legendary batches, dead rats mistaken for poultry, or the one time someone actually found a coin at the bottom. Good luck or impending doom, depending on the denomination. There's a rhythm to how these vendors navigate the city. Many start near the workers finishing shifts, the exhausted and underpaid who fix what the daylight breaks. One vendor, leaning into a conversation with a regular, maybe a lamplighter or carriage driver, slips gossip into the pot along with the potato peels, hints about a missing ring, a secret affair, the price of clean water. In exchange, the customer hands over coins and fragments of their night. The stories get thick as stew, flavored by regret or bravado. Every so often, trouble brews. Soup vendors meet the full spectrum: thieves, constables, insomniac poets, and ghosts who swirl through alleyways hungry for a taste of their former lives. Fights spark over the last ladleful sometimes, especially if the vendor's batch is particularly fragrant, or if a rival sets up cart just 20 paces down. And yet, under the haze of midnight, territorial disputes rarely escalate past ladles brandished like swords and words as sharp as bay leaves. No one asks, but most soup vendors barely sleep. By dawn, their faces are unreadable, eyes red with pepper smoke and fatigue, but always alert for the next hungry shadow. A child crying in the cold is fed before anyone else. The regular drunks get a piece of bread tossed in for free. The soup, whatever dubious ingredients it contains, becomes the city's nightly offering to the gods of survival, greasy, fragrant proof that even in hunger, there's comfort to be found. So, next time you stagger into the vapor of a midnight soup stall, coins already itching in your palm, remember this. You're not just buying a bowl of broth, you're buying a seat at a city's most democratic table, where stories, suspicion, and hope simmer together till dawn. If your wrists ache and your eyesight's going, chances are you're an ancient scribe, tasked with copying records by candlelight, while praying a moth doesn't eat the only page you've finished. Scribes, they were the quiet, ink-stained backbone of early civilization, the people who made sure knowledge outlasted the day it was spoken. They rarely starred in epic poems or bronze-cast legends, but don't be fooled. Without them, written history would just be that thing an old guy said once. Picture the scene: a cramped corner of some chilly monastery or a palace archive room, the air thick with the scent of melted wax and drying ink, both precious commodities. The scribe's toolkit is unimpressive but vital. A goose feather quill, a razor blade for trimming mistakes and fending off the occasional bored mouse, and a lamp sputtering out just enough light to illuminate words but never quite enough to fend off the creeping gloom. Let's talk hours. Today's commuter might moan about a full inbox, but imagine a pile of royal decrees that's literally taller than your chair. Interruptions? Fewer emails, more, "Your Grace, the roof is leaking on the scrolls again." And dinner isn't coming until you finish this copy of the king's favorite poem, each line rewritten by hand, carefully because one slip turns glorious victory into something just north of embarrassing mishap. The scribe's daily life baked patience and a desperate wish for spectacles right into their bones. A scribe learned early that perfection wasn't just encouraged, it was sometimes enforced with a slap on the wrist. Or worse, a disappointed headshake from the abbot, which somehow stung more. But it's not just the grind. There's also a subtle artistry to what the scribe achieves, mostly overlooked by everyone except other scribes. Each letter had to be crisp, clear, and, depending on the century and culture, sometimes decorated with curls, vines, or miniature beasts lurking in the margins. There were styles for the king, styles for the church, and even for those long winter evenings, styles just for trying to stay awake as the candle guttered closer to spent. If you've seen an illuminated manuscript, you've glimpsed the high wire act, a scribe's steady hand delivering centuries of wisdom, pain, or joy in indelible ink. On a bad day, though, the only thing illuminating the page is the looming knowledge of how expensive parchment is, and how irreplaceable. Of course, mishaps happened. The best scribes had tricks for scraping away errors, but not even the sharpest blade could save a manuscript dropped in a puddle or accidentally fed to the abbey goat. Even so, the margin notes, a quiet, "Woe unto me for these errors," or "My hands are so cold," bring a flash of humor and humanity across centuries. Against a backdrop of repetitive ritual, these side comments are tiny rebellions, almost a scribe's wink through time. If you've ever doodled in the border of a notepad during a meeting, you owe your impulse to these innovative pioneers. And why do we honor the scribe who works by candlelight? Because everything you know about ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome, or the Middle Ages, pretty much any time you couldn't just Google it, survives thanks to their sleepless nights and meticulous hands. They're proof that grand empires don't just run on generals, politicians, or poets, but on the people willing to sit, night after night, making sure that tomorrow knows what yesterday really said. So next time you jot a note or send a text, spare a thought for the person who made writing things down a job worth losing sleep over. Let me know if you need adjustments or want to add more specific historical examples. Who decided pulp, water, and patience made a great night project? Papermakers toiled away as the city slept, beating reeds and hoping the neighbors didn't mind the noise. Paper cuts at 3 a.m. are a special kind of agony. Because, let's be honest, there's something almost magical about the dark hours. A time when the world is quiet and even the most raucous city dogs have given up barking. In this quiet, illuminated by little more than the flicker of a lantern or the cobalt spill of moonlight through a dusty window, a papermaker's workshop feels both sacred and slightly dangerous. Fingers sticky with paste, someone mutters a string of impolite words, freshly delivered by a slip of the knife. The smell of wet fibers and the slow rhythm of the vat become a nocturne of their own. Swish, swash, drip. Yet, for all its romance, this is no glamorous endeavor. Behind every sheet of golden parchment lies the patient struggle, a room sticky with humidity, a floor perpetually bespeckled with water, and laundry lines sagging with dreamy rectangles of almost but not quite paper. The hours crawl in synchrony with the drying process. Watching pulp settle is a test of existential patience. You learn that time, much like a quarrelsome sibling, moves differently when you're waiting for something you need. It's not just the physical grind that makes night paper making its own beast. There's a mental endurance too, sharpened by low light and the isolation only night brings. Small disasters seem to grow teeth after midnight. The vat overflows. The screen warps. A gust of wind sneaks in through a cracked window, scattering still damp sheets about the room like ill-tempered ghosts. Stifled laughter, or sometimes a mumbled curse, follows, because really, what else can you do? Despite the setbacks, these lonely hours often conjure a peculiar kinship between maker and material. No one watching, no supervisors breathing checklist anxieties down your neck, just you, your aching hands, and a bucket of dreams suspended in water. Patterns begin to emerge in your work, a rhythm, a steadiness, a sense that you're folding a piece of the night into every page. By dawn, each sheet holds secrets known only to those willing to risk a paper cut at ungodly hours. Of course, the rest of the household might not be as enamored with your moonlit craft. The muffled thumping of pounding reeds, the groan of a press that hasn't been oiled since last Tuesday. And let's not forget the nighttime scent of boiled rags, which tends to drift through floorboards and invite more questions than anyone's prepared to answer before coffee. Papermaking is, in many ways, as much about negotiation with housemates, with the laws of physics, and with the limits of personal patience, as it is about art. Still, for those who have caught the fever, the rewards are bright and delicate as new parchment. Dawn arrives, and suddenly the night's labor glows golden in the early light. Each imperfect, lovingly roughened sheet is a testament to stubbornness and nocturnal vision. A reminder that sometimes the best work really does happen when everyone else has gone to bed. What draws someone to this odd creed of midnight makers? Perhaps it's the feeling of shaping something tangible from chaos, or the quiet pleasure of knowing your hands have made something that didn't exist the day before. Or maybe, just maybe, it's simply the only time left after the world's other demands have gone quiet. A secret pause in the schedule where only pulp, water, and the moon keep vigil with you. Let me know if you'd like to adjust the tone, add specific historical context, or otherwise tailor this further. Waterways in ancient China weren't just for pretty scenes, they were for night soil boats. If you rode them, you floated through moonlit canals, pondering why you didn't become a poet instead. Night soil. It sounds poetic, but it's the polite term for human waste. In a city as grand as Hangzhou or Suzhou, you had chamber pots inside homes, tea houses, and public bathhouses. Every morning, someone had to empty them. That someone was the night soil boatman. His day, or more accurately, his night, began when everyone else's ended. He'd push his low-covered barge from slip to slip, dunking heavy buckets, sometimes gagging, always resigned. It was a job that put him at the city's heart, even as it left him at the margins of society. Think of it for a moment. As scholars drifted off dreaming of immortality and merchants counted their coins, the night soil boatman was embarking on his own journey. He navigated the same canals as silk traders and storytellers, but his cargo was unspeakable. By the dim glow of oil lamps, he glided past weeping willows and stone-arch bridges, careful to keep his precious freight from sloshing over the gunnels. All the while, he tried to avoid the stares of early risers and the taunts of mischievous children who wrinkled their noses and called out names. Yet, for all their mockery, everyone depended on him. Without someone to haul away the city's shame, streets and courtyards would quickly turn foul. The silent routine of the boatman kept disease at bay and preserved the elegance that gave canal cities their beauty. Every sunrise, when the city awoke refreshed, it was partly his doing, though few remembered to thank him. If anyone did, it was with a half-hearted coin tossed to the planks, or perhaps a mug of weak tea set down outside the back door. His place in the city was both everywhere and nowhere. Officially, he was an employee, sometimes of the local government, sometimes of a private contractor. Pay was meager, but it put a roof over his head and a bowl of millet in his stomach. Socially, he was invisible. Marriage prospects were bleak. Who wanted a son-in-law whose hands never quite came clean? Even among the lower classes, the night soil boatmen spoke in a dialect of euphemisms and shrugged off invitations to festivals, knowing no one wanted a reminder of where their food and water actually came from. But listen, if you asked a boatman how he did it, he might reply with a sly smile, with a strong back and a closed nose. Some would even claim pride. They were guardians against foulness, anonymous heroes who knew the city's secrets, its alleyways, its rhythms, its most private corners. Elder night soil boatmen, their hair silvered by age and their lungs perhaps not the best, would pass tips to rookies. How to balance a bucket. How to row without a splash. Which routes let you work unseen. There were, of course, superstitions, small rituals for luck or for keeping spirits away. Some boatmen tied red cloths to the prows for protection. Others muttered invocations before entering a particularly rickety pier. The pungent cargo became, in a twisted way, a shield. While thieves plagued traders, no one, not even the most desperate, robbed a night soil boat. When the city modernized, flush toilets and sewage systems sounded the death knell for the night soil boatman. The profession faded, its routines replaced by pipes and pumps. But for centuries, these unsung laborers kept the city running, proof that every elegant society has its hidden workers, rowing quietly through the night, hauling away not just our waste, but the burdens of collective memory. Serving as a palace guard meant you were trusted to stay awake through endless hours of noble snoring. The perks, warm tea, a uniform, and maybe a gossip update from the kitchen. The downside, you might have to thwart a daring robbery, or just find where the prince left his shoe. Life as a palace guard was more than a test of vigilance. It was a lesson in boredom and absurdity. These men, and sometimes women, let's not forget the Countess's infamous big cousin, Frida, occupied the chilly corridors while the aristocracy slumbered. Each candlelit hallway cast long shadows, stretching the night to seem endless. Some guards would pace softly, boots echoing off the stone tiles in an unwelcome rhythm, while others propped themselves discreetly by doorways, careful not to drift off. The midnight hours could be eerily silent, broken only by the occasional snores reverberating from richly furnished bedrooms, or the clatter of a mouse emboldened by the quiet. Uniforms helped, at least at first. There's something about starched collars and brushed brass buttons that bolstered one's resolve. The guards became a living part of palace ritual, their sharp silhouettes reassuring to guests and, perhaps, intimidating to would-be mischief-makers. Of course, after a few shifts, the starch faded and the buttons loosened, but the pride, or at least the necessity, remained. A guard could spot a wayward chambermaid from 50 paces, or catch little Tybalt sneaking dessert from the kitchen. Again. But glamour was rare. Guards became adept at spotting not assassins, but sleepwalkers, lost pets, and the occasional drunken court minstrel who'd forgotten his way back to the guest wing. Some nights, nothing happened, except for the occasional wind rattling the windows. In those hours, the guards leaned heavily into storytelling, sharing whispers and jokes. Myths grew in the half-light, tales of secret tunnels beneath the palace, of a ghostly cook who seasoned soup with salt tears, and of why exactly the queen's pet peacock always shrieked at 2 a.m. At the heart of it all, the guards had front-row seats to the palace's nightly drama. They watched the noble classes at their most vulnerable, faces unmasked and hair mussed, dreams both grand and embarrassing flickering behind closed eyelids. The intrigue wasn't just external, it was internal, a sense of belonging to an exclusive, sleepless brotherhood, or occasional sisterhood, united by a common enemy, sheer exhaustion. The kitchens, warm and always half-lit, became a secret haven. Cooks finishing the day's prep would sometimes take pity, offering crusts of bread, a mug of broth, or, if you were very lucky, a slice of last night's pie. In exchange, the guards became keepers of culinary secrets, never letting slip who snuck an extra tart, or which butler had a fondness for midnight chocolate. And then there were the actual dangers, rare but very real. Palace guards needed to be ready at a moment's notice. A muffled crash might be a clumsy lord, or could it be a thief in velvet slippers? They were drilled to recognize the difference, to move quietly, to intervene with authority but a measure of tact, since the threat might just be Lady Marguerite's overly frisky cat. Still, some guards did go on to foil real threats, earning medals, new boots, or, perhaps most coveted of all, a day off. But mostly these sentinels stood as silent witnesses to the passing of noble knights, defenders not just from danger, but from chaos, disguised in the forms of misplaced shoes, missing gooseberry pie, and runaway pets. In the grand hierarchy of the court, they may have lingered in the quiet places, but to the palace in those dark hours, they were both guardian and gossip, protector and prank deterrent. The palace at night belonged to them, just a little, before the daylight and nobility reclaimed it, until it was night again, and once more the guards took up their watch. When the city dozed, the pleasure quarter thrived. Courtesans plucked strings and poured rice wine, soothing scholars and scoundrels alike, crafting the kind of wild stories you'll never find in textbooks. Lanterns bloomed along the eaves, painting the cobblestones with golden light, shadows flickering and leaping where laughter spilled from wooden tea rooms. The air shimmered with the scents of plum wine and perfumed hair oil. Outside, an honest citizen's day had ended. Inside, the true night was just beginning. In the amber-lit chambers, courtesans were artists as much as companions, their voices carrying the delicate scales of ancient songs, shaping the heartbeat of midnight. Nothing in the pleasure quarters happened by accident. Every gesture, how a courtesan wristed the neck of her pipa, how she leaned in to refill a guest's small ceramic cup, was a note in a larger, wordless composition. Patrons entered for a moment's distraction, but often stayed, caught in the courtesan's orbit, enraptured as much by whispered poetry as the flash of a daring smile. Here, scholarship and cunning mixed freely. Some men recited verses to impress, while others gambled away fortunes under the watchful eyes of women who understood the invisible pulse of the room. Each establishment had its own music. In low-lit nooks, the guzheng's rippling notes told stories without words, the blush of first love, the ache of longing, the sly chase of a night with too much wine. Laughter echoed between the sliding screens, swelling and receding with the music's rhythm. The best courtesans slipped effortlessly between roles, musician, confidant, strategist, shaping the mood with just a glance or the soft lift of an eyebrow. There were secrets behind every folding fan. Courtesans became experts at turning fragments of conversation into advantage. A nobleman's grievance, a merchant's loose tongue, these threads could weave new fortunes or unweave old political alliances. The pleasure quarters were safer than the courts, perhaps, but equally dangerous for the unwary. It was theater, and it was real. Rivalries played out in coded compliments, power exchanged beneath the surface, slights and affections, token gifts and hidden bargains. Each night was a tapestry, quickly unraveled come morning. But more than anything, there was the music. It stitched together everything. The ache of the courtesan's heart, the restlessness of the scholar seeking meaning, the cocky swagger of the rogue who fancied himself immune to beauty. As the moon slid higher, melodies grew slower, notes trembling like the last light on a wine-damp table. In that dark half-dream, the city's rough edges blurred, troubles blinked out of focus, sorrow dissolved into the perfumed haze. Even the most jaded patron lost track of time, drawn into the long, slow unfolding of a single song. Outside, the city slept on. Inside, the pleasure quarter swelled with stories, some lost to the dawn, some whispered down through the centuries. Here were patrons who would one day rule, and courtesans who understood every secret longing beneath polished conversation. When morning pressed at the shoji screens, only echoes lingered, a half-remembered verse, the touch of a melody, the memory of laughter that promised everything and owed nothing. In the textbooks, the pleasure quarters are reduced to footnotes and scandal. But the true legacy of those midnight courtesans, unwritten, ephemeral, persistent in the city's bones, was the art of making life shimmer by lantern light, of turning every night into a song worth remembering. Had a nightmare? Stubbed your toe? Herbalists stayed open late, doling out roots, powders, and unsolicited advice. Nothing says self-care like ground-up bat wings after midnight. The local herbalist might not have had a neon "open 24 hours" sign, but everyone in the village knew whose door to knock on at odd hours, be it for a mysterious rash, a broken heart, or just the latest village gossip. From the humblest peasant to the overworked baker with an unfortunate bunion, all found themselves at the wooden counter of the village's living medicine cabinet, greeted by the comforting, red, overwhelming aroma of dried chamomile and something suspiciously pungent. Herbalists didn't just hand over their potions, they performed a bit of theater. You'd sit amidst shelves buckling under jars of colorful powders and mysterious roots, while the herbalist narrated the origins of each. Ginseng from faraway hills, or maybe just the neighbor's garden, chamomile blessed by a full moon, and a few unlabeled powders that seemed to wiggle if you looked too long. Step aside, modern pharmacies with your monotonous prescription printouts. Here, you got a story with every scoop and a warning. Don't take this one before milking your goats, trust me. Each ailment demanded its own ritual. Sleepless nights? You might be handed a sack of lavender to tuck under your pillow, unless your herbalist was in a mischievous mood, in which case they might recommend balancing a potato on your head. Fever? Drink this bitter tea. Cursed by your neighbor? Burn this bundle of herbs, sprinkle some salt, and definitely don't look out the window for the next hour. Lavender, fennel, and mugwort were tossed around as freely as advice at a family reunion. And advice was half the herbalist's trade. Alongside your herbal remedy, you'd walk away with life pointers, ranging from dietary advice, eat more onions, they'll clear your head, to personal guidance, avoid picking mushrooms after sunset, and also avoid Gareth, he's trouble. These remedies and admonitions, scientifically questionable but infinitely entertaining, were delivered with a mix of authority and sly humor. Herbalists were part doctor, part therapist, part stand-up comedian, who happened to smell perpetually of sage. Word of the herbalist's prowess spread quickly, as did tales of their more questionable successes. The neighbor's miraculous recovery from a winter cold, helped perhaps by potion or perhaps by some thick soup and 2 days in bed, was all the advertisement needed. Failures were less spoken of, except in a whisper. Don't mention Mrs. Alderney's experiment with the nettle paste. Few professions were so intricately woven into daily life. Birth, herbalist, migraine, herbalist, mysterious bumps. Herbalist, probably making you a poultice that looked like last night's leftovers. Ghost sighting, herbalist, this time with a smoky bundle and a prayer. They were the village's first line of defense, the redoubtable guardians against everything from the mundane to the supernatural, even if that sometimes meant their most effective remedy was simply good conversation and a hot drink. Behind the jars and wild claims, however, lay centuries of folk knowledge, the subtle art of blending remedies, knowing which roots to mix and which to avoid, which stories to share and which to keep for special occasions. Embedded in the rituals was a long-running experiment as herbalists learned, adapted, and sometimes invented the cures that shaped the rhythms of daily health before the advent of aspirin or bandages and sterile wrappers. So, next time you grumble about waiting at the pharmacy counter, spare a thought for the herbalists, dispensers of cures, comfort, and the kind of questionable wisdom that kept communities running through sleepless nights and stubbed toes, all long before anyone invented caffeine pills or late-night television. Anyone crossing the town's bridges after curfew met the bridgekeeper, a blend of midnight toll booth operator and cryptic riddle master. Good luck bartering your way across with only half a dumpling as a payment. The bridgekeepers were chosen not by the mayor nor by any democratic majority, but by the bridges themselves. At least, that's what everyone said. Old Mrs. Dinley swore it was true. Step too heavily or carry a grudge, and the planks will simply turn you back. No one could verify her tale, but nobody wished to risk being hurled, boot first, into the moonlit river. Under their battered hats, bridgekeepers wore inscrutable smiles and waited out the hours with patience only rivaled by grandfather clocks. Their lanterns, always trimmed and glowing with firefly-like warmth, cast more shadows than light, and those queued up at the crossing would huddle together, trying not to look at the water below and failing not to listen to the keeper's humming. The tune changed nightly, sometimes a lullaby from lost empires, sometimes a tavern jig too jaunty for midnight. It was said the keepers hummed only when they knew something you didn't. For young daredevils, sneaking out past curfew was almost a rite of passage, but outsmarting the bridgekeeper was the ultimate test. Wits counted for double here. It wasn't just about solving riddles, though riddles there were, but about knowing the stories and superstitions that wrapped around the bridge like ivy. One boy tried singing the names of every mayor in reverse order, a strategy that cost him his last piece of fudge and a verse of carrot poetry. The bridgekeeper, delighted, let him pass, but sent him home with a new riddle that kept him awake for a week. Currency at the bridges was unpredictable. One night it might be a feather, bright and blue, from the strange birds nesting on the outskirts. Another, a polished stone, or a jar of pickled beetroot. The keepers never asked for much, but their standards were mysterious. "That's no ordinary coin," one keeper told a would-be crosser, refusing a whole silver piece with a gentle shake of his head. "You can't purchase a path across water with metal that's never seen rain." Some whispered the keepers could see straight through a lie, no matter how sweetly told. More than one traveler fumbled their alibi, found themselves talking backward as the bridge's planks seemed to retreat, step by reluctant step, away from late-night gallivants. The lesson learned was always the same. Honesty, or at least inventive honesty, was appreciated more than any attempted deception. Children loved collecting tales of the bridgekeepers. The night one traded his lantern for a shoelace and a promise. The evening another demanded a story instead of a toll. And the stormy dawn, a keeper let an old cat cross for free, explaining, "He's the only one who knows the hour the moon fell in the river." Parents rolled their eyes but recited the stories anyway, relieved when curfew brought their little adventurers home safe. It was clear to anyone with the patience to watch that the bridgekeepers guarded more than just planks and rope. Some believed the keepers held together the boundary between night's magic and day's certainty. With each riddle posed, each strange barter accepted, and every laugh shared with a trembling crosser, the keepers maintained a balance. One foot in the world of logic, the other gently dipping into wonder. So, if you ever found yourself at the river's edge after sunset, clutching nothing of value save your imagination, don't worry. The bridgekeeper would find something worth accepting. You'd leave with lighter pockets, a heavier mind, perhaps even a puzzle lodged behind your ears, reminded that some crossings are meant not just to move you to the other side, but to make you pause, if only for a riddle in the dark. Fabric never sleeps, apparently. textile workers hunched over looms, weaving silk and grumbling about the cold for generations. Smooth silk means zero sleep. Wax lanterns and guttering candles fight bravely against the night, shadows flickering up the stone walls and dancing across the pale threads. The workshop smells of oil, wool grease, and something older. Dust baked into the timbers by 100,000 nights the same as this. Spools clack, looms thump. The air fills with a thick, steady rhythm, like a heartbeat reminding you that while the rest of the town is curled under blankets, here, within these four walls, industry never blinks. A mother, her hair tied back with a rag, squints at the shuttle as she passes it from hand to hand. Her fingers are nimble. Years of working silk have left them with calluses as tough as a shoemaker's leather. Beside her, a boy no older than 10 dozes against a pile of discarded threads. He'll be woken before dawn by the foreman's bell, but for now, dreams are his only rebellion. Workers murmur in dialect, swapping stories, grumbling about cold feet and the sting of wool dust in their noses. Every now and then, laughter flickers up, unexpected, like firelight. Night work means bonuses, or at least, that's the rumor. More likely, it's just the price of keeping up with the endless orders that come from far-off cities. Merchants, nobles, princes, all demanding silk soft as whispers, cloth dazzling enough to drape a goddess. Nobody here will ever wear it. There's an irony in that, of course, bending over pattern books by candlelight, spinning magic none of them can afford. Someone snorts, "Maybe if I slip, I'll end up with a scarf on my doctor's bill." There's a chorus of weary chuckles. Outside, winter's chill is a living thing. Wind rattles the thin shutters. Frost crusts the iron-gray glass. For those on night shift, time stretches and blurs, punctuated by cups of thin broth and the distant peal of a church bell. Backs ache, eyes blur, but silk must be coaxed, not commanded. The smallest knot, one stray fiber, and the foreman's scolding will echo even after the thread runs out. Someone in the corner hums a lullaby. Off-key, perhaps, but somehow fitting. Underneath the song, the same questions flicker through every worker's mind. How many more hours? Will tomorrow's order be heavier than today's? Someone stifles a cough. Another chews a crust of stale bread. Life here, under the stars, marches to the drumbeat of the loom. It's hard, gritty, unglamorous. And yet, the workers know there's something of themselves, woven thread by thread, into every bolt that leaves the door. When fatigue gives way to numbness, eyes roam to the workshop's tiny window. Through dirty panes, the sky flickers with distant stars. So far away they seem to belong to another world entirely. But here, on this side of the glass, the workers keep weaving, night after night, stringing hope and labor across empty space. Some dream, secretly, that fate might slip a little stardust into their hands with the next length of silk. Most know better, but spin the dream anyway. The first hint of dawn brings not relief, but a subtle, shared determination. Spools are counted, needles wiped, hands flexed for another day. For all the grumbling, there's a quiet pride in this nocturnal labor, a legacy whispered down through calloused hands from worker to worker. Silk, fine as moonlight, is their letter to the future, a proof that they too wove something lasting under the wide, indifferent stars. Not all ancient jobs were noble. Under cover of darkness, spice smugglers hustled precious cinnamon and star anise, one step ahead of watchmen and 2 steps behind common sense. To grasp the world these secretive traders lived in, you have to imagine a time when a pinch of cinnamon was worth its weight in silver, and star anise could spark a miniature gold rush among market stalls. Long before supermarkets stocked neat little jars, spices moved along treacherous routes. These weren't just goods, they were secrets, locked away in the folds of caravans, tucked into hollowed walking sticks, or hidden deep within false bottoms of merchant carts. When dusk shrouded ancient alleys, the game was on. Smugglers slipped through moonlit courtyards, sometimes bribing a sleepy gatekeeper, sometimes darting through hidden doorways, always careful of the sharp ears of city guards. The stakes were high, and so were the rewards. Great empires struggled to tax or control the heady trickle of spice moving from east to west. So smugglers invented tricks as creative as any cat burglar, diversions with donkey carts, feigned illnesses to distract customs officers, and even elaborate costumes worthy of a stage play. One group disguised their contraband deep in honeycombs. Another swaddled it inside wax-sealed amphorae labeled as olive oil. If caught, the punishment could range from whippings to lifelong exile. But that didn't stop the daring or the desperate. Spice profits were legendary after all. A successful cinnamon run could buy you land, status, and sometimes your way out of trouble with the local magistrate. But spice smuggling wasn't just about personal fortune. It shaped empires. Medieval Venice owed a chunk of its wealth to those secret cargoes gliding into its lagoon by night. While in distant Alexandria, port officials played their own dangerous double games, officially cracking down on smuggling but eagerly pocketing their cut behind closed doors. The tension was constant, smugglers versus customsmen, ingenuity against ever stricter law. Over time, smuggling techniques evolved from swift-footed couriers and clever camouflages to organized, shadowy syndicates that could rival any modern underworld. Let's not forget the chaos at street level. For every successful smuggler who slipped through the net, there were a dozen salty tales of betrayal and double-cross. Partners turned informants, rival crews sabotaged each other's shipments by lacing pepper sacks with gravel or tipping off harbor patrols. The spice route became a stage for stories that blended greed and grit, a dash of suspense, a sprinkle of cunning, and just a hint of slapstick. Imagine a would-be crook sneezing at the worst possible moment, betraying his cinnamon stash to a suspicious guard. Yet, with all the cloak and dagger, spice smuggling wove itself into the fabric of everyday life. The luxurious aromas that filled palaces and perfume-bustling food stalls were, quite often, brought by hands that had braved moonless crossings and narrow escapes. If you drizzled honey over baked figs in ancient Rome, or savored masala wine along the Ganges, thank not just the merchant, but also the smuggler, whose gamble put rare flavors on common tables and made the world, bite by bite, a spicier place. As we lift the lid on history's kitchens, it's clear. Some of the boldest recipes depended less on cooks and more on the nimble, mischievous spice runners who risked everything for taste. In the shadows, every fragrant pinch told a story, one whispered between risk and reward, greed and gourmet. If your job is to read the stars, night is when you shine, literally. Ancient astrologers squinted at the heavens, promising fortune or disaster, often both in the same scroll. Historians agree, the world wasn't built on caffeine, but on questions. Who better to address them than the people who seemed to work best while everyone else was asleep? The astrologer's domain was the inky blanket of night, their office a cold stone rooftop, their co-workers a handful of dusty scrolls and the politely indifferent moon. Picture this, a lone figure, robes cinched against the chill, eyes adjusting to a spray of stars overhead. There's palpable drama in the moment, each celestial body marking a different line in the epic saga of someone's life down below. A sheepish merchant, waiting beneath, hoping for a year of good luck and trade. A jittery noble, desperate to know if political winds will favor him or sweep him clean off the map. They look up, waiting for pronouncements of fate, or at least something, interpretive and vague enough to cover all possibilities. But let's be honest, at 3 a.m., is anyone really at their most accurate, ancient wisdom notwithstanding? Disheveled scribes jot notes by oil lamp and try not to mistake the constellation of Taurus for a smudge on their lens. The modern equivalent might be mass email horoscopes, shot out at midnight, fueled by the last dregs of a triple espresso. Tomorrow, expect change. Technically never wrong, always applicable. Still, for all their midnight rituals and sleep deprivation, astrologers had their methods. There were charts, diagrams, calculations with improbable accuracy for someone battling frostbite and sleep debt. One wrong line charted, and a farmer's fate went from bountiful harvest to consider investing in goats. Yet despite the hazards, the astrologers' pronouncements carried real weight. Emperors delayed campaigns, lovers delayed weddings, investors delayed, well, whatever counted as investing before Wall Street, probably more goats. There's an irresistible theatricality to the whole business. The astrologer sits cross-legged on woven mats, lays out the star charts with a ritual's precision, and begins the slow, ancient chant of calculation. Maybe there's the rhythmic clatter of abacus beads, maybe just the scraping of quill on parchment. Either way, the audience is rapt. The job requires a blend of scholarship, confidence, and the ability to say, with a straight face, that Mars in retrograde means it's complicated. And every astrologer worth their salt knew how to hedge. Mars and Jupiter are in rare alignment, excellent for business enterprises, unless Saturn's influence tips the scales. Translation: if things go well, you're a genius. If not, it was obviously Saturn's fault. It was scientific ambiguity before it was cool. Today's economic forecasters salute you. Of course, being an oracle in the dead of night came with hazards other than muzziness. Sleep-deprived astrologers might mistake fireflies for omens, or the neighbor's cat's shadow for the rising of a new star. Spoiler, it never bodes well when the neighbor's cat is involved. Sometimes a prediction spiraled wildly out of control. Local legend told of an astrologer predicting rains of fish. In reality, just an overturned market cart and some very annoyed vendors. So, why did everyone rely so much on 3 a.m. predictions? Simple. The veil felt thinner then, the world softer and more malleable. Nighttime was when the mysteries whispered most clearly, when hope and fear crept closer than reason. People wanted reassurance, a pattern in the randomness, a reason to believe they'd survive the uncertainties of daybreak. If that reassurance came from someone shivering atop a parapet, reading the sky like a cosmic spreadsheet, so be it. In the end, the astrologer's real genius was storytelling, spinning a narrative out of pinpricks of light and keeping hope alive until sunrise. It didn't matter if the fortune foretold was prosperity, doom, or wait and see. When tomorrow is uncertain, sometimes all you need is someone to remind you that the stars have your back, even at 3 a.m. Fire at night is everybody's nightmare. The fire brigade prowled the lanes, hoping their buckets would never be needed, and secretly wishing someone would invent plumbing already. Back then, fire brigade was a rather grand term for a few sturdy locals with buckets and a penchant for late-night drama. Their main equipment: buckets, no hoses, no magic axes, just buckets. Some nights, the men would pass the time comparing the merits of their wooden handles, or the smoothness of the metal, as if their buckets were top-of-the-line horse carriages. "Mine never leaks," one might boast, just as another pointed out the fine craftsmanship of his family's bucket, a heirloom if ever there was one. The brigade wasn't made up of professionals. By day, they were bakers, butchers, or cobblers' apprentices. By night, they donned their uniforms, that is, an old coat, rolled-up sleeves, and the stubborn conviction that they could stop a fire with sheer willpower. But if you listened closely, you'd hear the nervousness in their banter. Everyone remembered the last big blaze, the one that took out 4 houses, a hen house, and Mrs. Perkins' entire supply of pickled beets. That fire had moved faster than gossip on washing day, devouring everything in its flickering path. No one slept deeply after dark. The fear of fire was a low, constant hum in the village. When a dog barked at midnight, or a distant cockerel sounded off too early, the brigade would spring up and peer through windows, hearts pounding. Fire could start from anything: the careless flick of a pipe, a tipped-over lantern, a baker's oven gone rogue. And since the houses were cheerfully stacked up, wood on wood, thatched roof leaning into thatched roof, one person's misfortune soon became everyone's catastrophe. Still, the brigade maintained a kind of hopeful optimism. They would march up and down the main street during the chill hours, swinging their lanterns and pretending they were night watchmen in some great city, rather than a handful of villagers with damp boots. Kids shadowed them, sneaking peeks around corners, hoping to glimpse a real heroics, or at least to be allowed to carry a bucket in an emergency. Some nights, someone would call out, "Smoke!" and for a few panicked minutes, everyone would run, squinting into the gloom until it turned out to be the baker's chimney again, or someone's laundry catching the moonlight. But if the bell ever did sound, clear and chilling through the lanes, the brigade would snap into action. Plans flew out the window as adrenaline roared in. "Bucket line!" shouted the captain, a title earned mostly by shouting, "Bucket line!" louder than anyone else. The buckets sloshed, water from well to flame, each handoff as crucial as the last. Water splashed, boots slipped, and once, famously, a pig got caught up in the bucket line and nearly made it to the well before anyone noticed. Amidst the chaos, the burning house loomed. Villagers held their breath, watching as the flames fought back, hungrily licking at timbers. And yet, sometimes, just sometimes, the brigade won. A smoldering roof ended up as nothing more than a soggy mess, or a wall was saved from collapse. When that happened, there was celebration in the form of communal cider and a collective sigh. The heroes of the night retired to their beds just as dawn painted the sky, soot-smeared and weary, but proud, until the next alarm or the next wild tale. Because in this village, the fire brigade wasn't just made up of bucket-wielding men. It was a promise they all made to each other. No one faced the dark alone. Who was recording the city's secrets while everyone snoozed? The night historian scribbling history's weirdest footnotes, sometimes while fending off bats with a bamboo pen. The city shifts dramatically after midnight. While most residents snuggle deeper into their straw mattresses, there are always a few stubborn souls haunting the shadows. The herbalist brewing disagreeably aromatic potions, the noodle vendor still hoping for one last sale, and, of course, the unpaid historian, clad in layers for warmth, crouched beneath a guttering lantern and armed with nothing but cheap ink and curiosity. No portrait hangs for them in any temple, and no ballads are sung in beer halls about their epic note-taking. But every strange noise, every half-heard argument, every midnight proclamation, every suspicious clatter from the warehouse district needed someone to notice, someone to write it all down. People say the night has ears. Really, it just had historians with lousy sleep schedules. Imagine their desk, not the tidy, paper-strewn workspace of a daytime scribe, but a battered plank balanced across old crates, perennially sticky from spilled tea, and suspiciously flecked with, let's call it, bat guano, possibly. Here, in the flickering half-light, they captured history's private moments. Governors sneaking out for dumplings, the occasional ghost sighting, scandals only partially muffled by the cover of darkness. Yes, the big official stories happened at the emperor's court, but cities are made from sweaty commerce and back-alley intrigue. The night historian dealt in rumor, accidental poetry, and things that didn't want to be remembered. It was a thankless task. Nighttime scribblers rarely got paid. Glory didn't extend to those who kept watch when witnesses and rich patrons were already tucked up for the night. They weren't historians, really, so much as accidental archivists. Many started because they scribbled marginalia for patrol officers, court physicians, or because they couldn't sleep and found themselves drawn to the city's glow like moths to a manuscript. Years later, if anyone noticed, it was because a disaster was averted. Wasn't there a note about a suspiciously squeaky wheelbarrow and a bad batch of eel buns? Or a centuries-old lawsuit got resolved because a bored night scribe had, in fact, jotted down who borrowed that cursed bronze kettle. Despite the glamour of sleeping in an attic above a rowdy tea house and the ironclad guarantee of freezing toes, the night historian's greatest reward came from gossip, the secret thrill of knowing the city better than anyone. They could recite which baker forgot his keys every Tuesday, or which councilman's sneeze always signaled a coming rainstorm. No bureaucratic edict or heroic statue compared to the small, semi-heroic act of remembering. And occasionally, when danger lurked, a fire breaking out, an odd procession winding through alleyways, or the thump of feet heralding trouble, the night historian pivoted from observer to accidental hero. Their scribbles became maps, warning signs, and sometimes feeble evidence delivered to skeptical officials at sunrise. Their accounts, dubious penmanship and all, sometimes saved lives, or at least explained odd smells wafting from the city's cheese shop. They weren't seeking immortality, they were just compelled to make sure, when dawn's light returned and everyone else rose asking, "What happened out there?" Someone could answer, if not with certainty, then at least with a good story. So the next time you read some odd footnote about unseasonal parades, or a mayor puzzling over a midnight cake thief, spare a thought for the unpaid night historian. With ink-stained hands and a bull-headed resolve, they captured the heartbeat of a restless city. One shadow, one sigh, one scribbled secret at a time. And now, as the last lantern sputters out and you retreat from ancient city streets back to your blessedly uncluttered bedroom, let's take a moment to honor the sleep-deprived, often unsung heroes of the night. Through sweltering summers and bone-chilling winters, these awkward, often underappreciated workers kept civilization running, while everyone else drooled into their pillows. Sure, their jobs involved a lot more filth and about 1,000% more rats and questionable soup than anything you'll face tomorrow. But somehow, these everyday folks survived shift after shift with only a bamboo rattle, a bit of stubbornness, and the faint hope that sunrise might bring an easier life. So, tonight as you stretch out with clean sheets, running water, and not a single bamboo clapper in sight, maybe send a sleepy thanks to the ancient night crew. They face specters, soup with suspicious floaties, and bosses with even weirder hours. Also, you can drift off without wondering if a curfew enforcer will demand your ID. Because history proves one thing: we've always coped with the dark, found ways to laugh, and survived long, enough to get to the next morning. Good night, and may your dreams be utterly rattle-free.